In this video we're going to run through solving a polynomial by factoring. The way I teach this is a four-step method. On step 1, whatever equation that we're given, we're going to set the equation equal to 0. For step 2, we'll check to see if each of the terms have something in common. If they do, we'll pull that out front and factor it like we would normally, the opposite of the distributive property. For step 3, once we take out the GCF, what we're looking for, difference of squares, trinomials that factor, maybe we'll factor by grouping, a lot of different ways that we can factor a polynomial completely. For step 4, once we have the individual factors written out, we'll set each of those equal to 0 and solve them to get our final solutions. So here's an example of a couple of them. First, let's solve 3x to the 5th power equals 27x cubed. On this example, we're going to have to set it equal to 0, so I'll subtract 27x cubed from both sides of the equation. Since these are not like terms, they don't combine. I'll write it 3x to the 5th power minus 27x cubed equal to 0. For step 2, we're asking ourselves, do these two terms have anything in common? Looking at it, the 3 goes into both terms, and both terms have an x cubed. So what I'm going to do is factor out a 3x cubed. To fill in the parentheses, we ask ourselves, 3x cubed times what gives us 3x to the 5th power? Think about it for a little bit, and you would multiply by x squared to get 3x to the 5th power. Now 3 times what gives you negative 27? That would be a minus 9. And x cubed times 1 gives us x cubed. We're about done. On step 3, we have to factor this polynomial completely. And what we may recognize is that x squared and 9 are both square numbers. We have a minus in the middle. That means we're going to factor out a difference of two squares. We'll open up two sets of parentheses and put a plus and minus in front of each of those. X times x gives us x squared, and 3 times 3 gives us our 9. So we have factored this polynomial completely. Our final step is to set each of these factors equal to 0, solve them respectively. So 3x cubed equals 0, x plus 3 equals 0, and last, x minus 3 equals 0. To solve this, you could divide both sides by 3 and cube root both sides. But let's ask ourselves, 3 times what cubed equals 0? Well, 3 times 0 cubed is equal to 0. So that's going to be one of our solutions. Subtract 3 from both sides of the equation here. X equals negative 3 is also a solution. And last, we could do x equals positive 3 because we added 3 to both sides of the equation. So in this particular example, we have 3 solutions that are possible. Let's take a look at a polynomial of this form. We already have it set equal to 0. So next we're going to check, do these terms have anything in common? This third term here does not have a w, so I will not factor out any variables. But the coefficients of each term have a 4 in common. Let's factor out a 4 from each of these terms. We'll be left with w to the 4th plus 10w squared and minus 11. From here we could always check our answer. Did we do this factoring correct? Redistribute this 4 out. 4 times w to the 4th gives me 4w to the 4th. Good. 4 times 10w squared gives me 40. And 4 times negative 11 gives me negative 44. This parenthesis is the form of a trinomial. So what I'm going to look for are factors of negative 11 that add up to 10. Let me list out all my factors. How can I multiply to get negative 11? Well, negative 1 and 11, or positive 1 and negative 11. So these are the only two ways that I can multiply to get the third number. Which of these adds up to 10? That would be the top one. So I'm going to write two sets of parentheses, and we'll say w squared minus 1 and w squared plus 11. From here, can we factor any more? Because I have a plus in the middle, there's nothing I can do here. These are not a sum of cubes. On this middle factor, w squared minus 1 is a difference of two squares. We'll open up two sets of parentheses. And to factor this, plus minus w times w gives me w squared, and 1 times 1 gives me negative 1. Set each of these individual factors equal to 0 and solve them. W plus 1 equals 0. W minus 1 equals 0. W squared plus 11 equals 0. The first two equations are going to be pretty easy to solve. Minus 1 gives you the first solution. Add 1 to both sides, we get our second solution. Now on this third term, we're going to subtract 11 from both sides. So w squared equals negative 11. This right here is saying what times itself equals a negative number. 3 times 3 gives you positive 9. Negative 3 times negative 3 gives you positive 9, excuse me. There's going to be no real number when multiplied by itself that will give you a negative number. This is an imaginary solution. So we don't care about the imaginary solutions right now. For now, the two solutions to this polynomial are going to be negative 1 and positive 1.